Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And we have Michael Collins, and he has been completely sugar-free for over 30 years, which is very impressive. And he's been helping thousands successfully quit sugar for over 9 years. He has a website called sugaraddiction.com. And welcome, Michael, today.
Thanks for having me, Chantel. I really appreciate it.
So I want us to talk about, our title today is how to combine intermittent fasting with also beating your sugar addiction. So first, let's really talk about let's talk about sugar addiction.
Yeah.
How do you know that you are addicted to sugar? Or if you say, you're one of those people that can eat 3 bites and really push it away.
Well, most of the folks that come, and most of the folks we work with, the assessment is made by you. There is now a movement to get sugar addiction into the DSM-6, which is the diagnostic manual, whatever, for psychiatric diseases or, maladies. But, it's not there yet. In other words, like binge eating got put in last time and this, so science is moving forward, but there is a big move, and sugar addiction is, it's a constellation of different things. Like, I believe that it's very similar. I mean, it ticks all the boxes for addiction, tolerance, when you use it, you want more. All of the qualifications for addiction are there. And to be honest, most folks I always say, if you ever get to sugaraddiction.com, you don't have to take the quiz. Because look, you probably know deep in your soul that you have an addiction to sugar. It's not like it's a mystery to you because you've tried many times to quit or cut back and with no success, right? Most of our folks have tried 6 or 8 or 10 diets, and they, all of them involve quitting the white stuff or sugar and flour or whatever, and they just can't do it. And so, like I said, that meets all of the qualifications technically for addiction, but it is not technically in any diagnostic manuals just yet.
Awesome. So let's say that somebody is doing intermittent fasting and they say, I'm doing great with intermittent fasting. Maybe they're eating in a 6-hour window, but now they feel like this is the one thing that's holding them back. So once they start eating sugar, it's like sugar begat sugar begat sugar. All they want to do is just eat more of it. So, let's talk about besides, like, do you guys have categories, right? So like one category would be like candy, Skittles, stuff like that. And one would be like, okay, fruit or white flour. Talk about how you break that up into categories.
Well, it's people I get a lot of pushback on those categories. I call them borderline food sometimes. Obviously, like you said, we have the blatant sugar products like candy and ice cream and cookies, whatever. But then on the borderline, you have oats, rice, lots of fruit juice for sure, dried fruit, these kinds of things. A lot of nuts. These are things that people, some dairy, like people can ingest these things safely when they're getting off sugar, and then some people can't without setting up cravings. The bottom line is that if it creates, if it spikes your glucose, spikes your blood sugar, then, you probably need to stay away from it. And you can do that by finger pricks or a continuous glucose monitor. You can figure it out because the sugar spike is going to want you, so let's just say you're eating a lot of brown rice or a lot of oatmeal or something, a lot of fruit and oats or whatever. You're going to feel like you want more. You're going to crave more. The neural pathways, literally, that have been grooved in your brain, have the two combined. It's like Pavlovs dogs, wired together, fired together. You start to drink or eat some like just straight flour product, like a bagel or something. Then all of a sudden, your mind says, usually that's kind of combined with cookies or cake or something. And then you want the other. So it's very difficult not to do both. It's just really hard because the blood sugar elevation is going to start you craving on the I call it straight sugar, the fructose laden sugar. And the fructose is where the problem lies, right? The fructose is what affects the nucleus accumbens, the brain reward chemicals. And the glucose only elevates the blood sugar, right? And so we all know what the blood sugar does to our bodies, diabetes and all the heart disease. And, they're calling Alzheimer's diabetes 3. So we know what the glucose does. And for your audience, glucose and fructose are each half of the molecule, the sugar molecule. So, yeah, I mean, there is kind of a division of the two, but for the most part, you got to do both. You got to try and get off both to help you get off the weight stuff, I call it the hard stuff.
That's a good analogy. I do want to mention Pavlov's dog for just a second. For those of you who don't know what that is, my girlfriend told me about it when we were on a walk a while ago. She's actually a Christian counselor, and she had gotten a brand new puppy, and she had Googled different dog training techniques. And as she was browsing, she came upon the psychologist, Evan Pavlov, who created this philosophy, but basically he discovered a way to create external associations with food. So he'd ring a bell, and every time he rang it, he'd give the dogs food. And eventually the dogs learned to associate the sound of the chime with the expectation of food. And so the dogs would start drooling, right? Every time the bell rang, even though there was no food present. And so the analogy would be, my favorite analogy that I talk about in my book is like my friend Mitchell, who he loves to eat when he sits in front of the TV. And so he literally, in fact, can't even sit at the TV without having a bowl of pretzels or popcorn. He's associated, okay, I'm sitting to watch TV. He's conditioned himself to associate sitting on the couch, watching TV, and needing a snack. So let's talk about how to break that cycle where every time you sit on the couch, you kind of have to pause and say, okay, what's the next step for him? Let's pretend it's sugar. Let's pretend that every time you go on the couch, you have maybe, I hear people saying a bowl of ice cream or Skittles or M&Ms, whatever it is. So what would be that step that you'd have to retrain?
Yeah, that's kind of a deeper question in that, I like to try and tell people that they're really not after the sweet. They're really not after the food product, that they're after a dopamine hit. They're after a jolt to their nucleus accumbens, their brain chemicals. Because in the last 5 years, the science has really exploded to understand that these products, these sugar products, literally affect the brain reward systems exactly like drugs of addiction, alcohol, other drugs of addiction, alcohol and cocaine and whatever. And they've done studies inside of MRIs, and the brain lights up when they have these products. So what's happening to your friend is very similar to any other addict, because you're associating, they call it triggers in our world. You're triggered to have this, not the ingestion of the food, but actually the dopamine hit. You're looking to feel better. The brain, I heard this great line the other day, the brain doesn't care how it gets dopamine. It could be illicit sex, it could be gambling, it could be running, it could be any way to get that dopamine hit. And we've trained our brains since we were children, literally. Our parents probably did it, probably in the womb, as early as the womb, to, like, if we're feeling bad or anxious or distressed or whatever, that we have some sugar. And now this is a subconscious pattern, like Pavlov's dogs, that is ingrained in us, in all of society, to just reach for this product when we're sitting on the couch, instead of going for a run or a walk or getting a hug or whatever. We've trained ourselves that we just ingest this substance and we get this dopamine hit, right? And that's the part that people need, like an entire podcast to kind of set up. They need to understand that the way out of this issue, if they have an issue or if they want to look at it, is to not so much think about the food, but think about how they were feeling just before they had the food. Like, were they anxious? Were they upset? Whatever. So, yeah, I mean, it truly is, like you describe, a trained a response. It's like the dogs. It's a trained response, which can be broken. And that's exactly what has to, it's like Tony Robbins calls it a pattern interrupting. You have to interrupt the pattern some way and then do something different.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely think that one of the things that I have had to do myself is say, to make a negative association with food, with sugar, not with food, but in the sense that I used to think, and I'll tell you what happened to me when I was younger. My dad used to joke that my mom was so anti sugar in our house that it made it where, like, he would say to me, "Oh, you've been really good today. You will get 2 M&Ms." That's what my mom would say. Like, you were good, you get 2 M&Ms. You were good, you get 3. Because she was so like, you can't have sugar, you can't have sugar, and made it such a thing in our house. Now, all of a sudden, I had, in my mind, it was like, when I'm good, I get 3 M&Ms. I had to reprogram that to say, out of my mind, I need to say, oh, I did a great job today. I'm going to go get a massage, or I'm going to go get a walk. And I know that when I start eating too many of this, it just makes me want more and more and more. And it's not good for my body. So I had to really retrain my brain in that.
Sure. Yeah, there's a guy, we have this Quit Sugar Summit every year, and we introduced or interviewed this dentist from the Great Britain. And he has a project, a nonprofit called the Rewards Project. And what it is, real simple, is to stop rewarding kids with sugar products for athletics and scholarships and for scholastic stuff. I mean, it's just a really crazy way to motivate children or to help them with their behavior. And so it's just, you do have to reprogram yourself. And that's probably the most important part of getting off of sugar, is to change those patterns and those programmings.
So I noticed myself, we're creating a prize table at our church for the elementary kids. And I said, name some prizes that I could put, Kyle, at the prize table. I said, what about like maybe a box of Skittles, and I said candy. That was my first reaction that came out of my mouth. And my son, who's 9 years old, came back to me. He's like, Mom, I don't understand. You're doing like this sugar detox, 30-day sugar detox, and you're always talking about not wanting to get people on sugar. And now on the prize table, you're going to put Skittles. And I was like, oh my gosh, son, I love you so much. You are the best son. Like, I tell my son every day, you're everything I've ever wanted in a son and more. And he really is. But I mean, imagine him coming back to me, saying that to me. It's like, why would I put that on the prize table? That doesn't make sense.
Well, I hope you're making huge changes in society. I mean, think about it now. The same thing would happen if you got in the car and didn't have your seatbelt on. He'd tell you, Mom, put your seatbelt on, because now they understand it. And hopefully that translates into everyone doing that eventually. 10, 15 years from now, all kids, hopefully all parents, will understand exactly what your son already understands.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about just practical tips that you can give people that say, okay, I really want to cut sugar down out of my diet. And I want you to talk about it, because some people, I've interviewed over 1,000 women, and there's tons of women who they can have 3 bites of sugar. It doesn't affect them, and they can eat it. They're in full control, and, they're fine. And for those people, I'm like, go ahead and eat those 3 bites of sugar. It's not going to kill them. They're in great health. They're not overweight. So for people like that, I'm like, great. If there are people out, so I want you to kind of talk about it on 2 perspectives.
Yeah.
One, on some of those people who they are in control. And then I want you to talk about it for people who maybe are just, they realize, I do have an addiction in this area.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of science that's coming up now, and about a third of the people are biochemically unable to ingest this product without craving more and having more. And these track pretty closely to the obesity numbers. Like a third of people are overweight or obese, excuse me, and a third are overweight, and then a third are kind of normal. And the second third we call harmful use, which is what you're describing. People who they might be able to cut way back and then have a treat once in a while. But that first group, they definitely biochemically, at least for now, until they get a year or so down the line, they can't ingest it without setting up cravings, right? So even like we're going to talk, I guess, about intermittent fasting combining. If you're just, you're just always going to have that niggling, nasty feeling that you want more if you're ingesting it. And the further you get away from it, in other words, if you get 30, 60, 90 days in, those physical cravings disappear. And so you don't have them, right? And a normal person, like you're talking about, they can eat half a brownie, leave it on the plate, never think about it, And so that's the difference biochemically with the folks. And the harmful use folks in the middle, they have just, from society, from their parents, whatever, they've been trained to use sugar. And when they quit, they can sometimes, if they get a long enough period of abstinence, they start to understand how it was affecting them emotionally. And they get control of it, if you will. Those folks can go back to occasional use, right, and have a little bit. So there's these three camps, and they all have different ways of handling how we get them off it.
So let's talk about, if you're new to intermittent fasting, you haven't really done it yet before, you're brand new and you want to cut sugar, versus if someone's a trained, like they've been doing intermittent fasting, maybe they've been eating in a 6-hour window for the last, year or so. Let's talk about how they would do things differently by cutting sugar out of your diet.
Yeah, no, it's a great differentiation that needs to be out there, because we've done thousands of these detox and had people come in various stages of intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting is something people end up researching when they get to our programs as well. And so what we found is that folks that have never done intermittent fasting, it doesn't mix well at the beginning to try and do intermittent fasting and get off sugar.
You need too much at one time.
Too much at one time, right? It sets up binging. It just literally sets up binging, because you're so long in the middle of withdrawals that this feeling that is really not hunger, but it feels like hunger, it's really just cravings. That just reaches out and grabs you. So, but folks that have come in with an intermittent fasting program, but just can't in their windows stop using the sugar, those folks can continue and they can do the intermittent fasting. And on the other side, a lot of our folks, once they get 90 days or 120 days, then they try intermittent fasting again, and it works fine. So it's that thing of, when you come to like your program, and you've never done it, then try and eat 3 square meals a day for the first 90 days or 60 or 90 days, and then possibly try the intermittent fasting. It'll work much better.
Hey guys, I'm so excited. My new book, One Meal and a Tasting, is out now. And if you order the book on Amazon, just the regular paperback edition, if you go in and make a review, you will get the audiobook for free. Send a copy of your receipt to questions@chantelrayway.com and you'll get the audiobook right away. Yeah, I agree with you. It's like too overwhelming to try to cut so much at one time.
Yep.
So
yeah, people succeed.
Go ahead.
No, people succeed very well when they come in with a program. And I had a guy lost 100 pounds on keto and intermittent fasting. He had that window, but he had about 60 more to lose. And then we finally figured out the piece of why he kept going back to the sugar, and he succeeded. So yeah, it's very doable.
So let's talk about a continuous blood glucose monitor. I don't have diabetes, but I've got mine right here. I haven't eaten anything all day, and I'm looking at mine. Normally I stay in the 80s.
Yeah.
But randomly, I haven't eaten one thing. I did have a cup of coffee, but it brought and my blood sugar's at 95, which is really high for me.
Mm, yeah.
When I haven't eaten anything all day.
Hmm.
But I think my cortisol is up. I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off today and just go one thing after another after another.
That'll do
And
it.
so I think that kind of brought me up a little bit. Maybe my cortisol is kind of going crazy.
Right.
But let's talk about these kind of tips. For me personally, this blood glucose monitor has really, really helped me to cut back on my sugar because I'm constantly looking at it and saying, I want to keep my blood sugar down. So I want to be really mindful of the carbs that I have and the sugars I have.
Yeah. I actually believe we just did our Quit Sugar Summit the January edition, and we had two people, one from Levels Health and one from NutriSense, the docs from there, the nutritionists and the docs, and they sent me them. So I have been using one over the last month or so, right? And I believe this thing changes the world. The continuous glucose monitor. Right now they're called invasive because they put the little filament on your arm or whatever. But when Amazon and Google are working on them so that they are just on your wrist or something. Hold on, let me just push this button. And those things are like, when I first tried it, like I haven't had sugar in 30 years. So I said, what do we got around the house? So I had a sweet potato, and you talk about mine was exactly the same. Mine was 84. Like I don't eat till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, whatever. 84 the whole time, and then it goes up a little depending on what vegetable I have or whatever. But when I ate that sweet potato, it jacked to 184. That's
Wow.
100 points up, right? And then the next time I did it, I experimented with oats and bananas with oats, right? It went to 228. So we're talking like 150 points almost up, right? And people, if they were to realize exactly what you were able to just show, that on a continuous basis in real time, that they could see their blood sugar going up. And I can't even imagine, Chantel, what would happen if I ate a candy bar. It would probably be up over 300, And this constant of the average American eating 20 plus teaspoons of sugar a day keeps you way in the bad range, up above 140 or 150 all the time, and that creates the metabolic syndromes. It creates the diabetes, these kinds of things. And so having a continuous glucose monitor, you need a prescription in the United States, but you can get it through some of these companies that are coming up. They have that covered through telemedicine. You can get it. And as a biohacking tool, as something that's not preventative. Traditionally, these things were used for type 1 and type 2 diabetics. And so now the biohackers and folks like you and I, we want to know what's going on with our blood sugar. And I think if people were wise to this little tool, they would, be much healthier. I love those things, and I think they're going to be huge.
So I kind of zoomed in on mine, but you can see mine all day. It's like it was in the 80s, and then all of a sudden, it bumped up for no reason because I did. Actually, I think maybe the coffee. Sometimes. Coffee, I'm not a big coffee drinker. I just have it sometimes. And so every once in a while I just say, I need
coffee does, we've proven, and there is studies that it does jack the blood sugar a little bit.
Yeah. So I stay in the 80s, like somewhere in the 80s for the most part. But then if I have that coffee, like I guess it jacked me up to the 90s. But I think that it really, I'm telling you, I can't say enough good things about this. And I'm actually having the CEO on this week.
Oh, good.
Blood sugar monitor that's going to tell people how they can get it and what they can do. But I think it's a miracle. So what else can they do? Let's give people some real practical takeaways of some more practical things. Blood glucose monitors, one. What else?
Well, I think they have to realize, and now remember, I come from an addiction background, and I've been sober 35 years. I've helped many, many people get off of much harder drugs. And the thing that people are unwilling to accept is that they're unwilling to accept the possibility that they may have a little bit of an addiction to sugar. Now, think nicotine here, not heroin and alcohol and stuff. This is just something that biochemically, when you ingest it like a cigarette, you want another one, and you need your craving. If people can get through the other side of the cravings, then it's fine, right? But like we mentioned, that group of the third of people, they're biochemically, when they ingest sugar, there's just this reaction in their body that they want and need more. And it's combination, like it's partially the brain chemicals, the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, affected by the fructose, but it's also partially the blood sugar dysregulation that we've been talking about with the CGMs. It's like people end up, they get a little bit of sugar, like they'll get up over 100 or 200 or 100 or 120, 130, and they're all of a sudden they're going to, this neural pathway that's literally been grooved in their brain since they were a baby, that once they start to get this little bit of boost in blood sugar, then they're going to want more fructose, which will also hit the nucleus accumbens. They've actually slid people into MRIs. I mean, people can see the brain chemicals light up in their brains when they sip sugary beverages. So if people can just kind of accept I call buying into Mikey's little fantasy, the idea that they may have a little bit of an addiction to sugar. It's not just a bad habit, it's a little bit of an addiction. Then they can usually, that's kind of the acceptance that they have to have, that level of acceptance. I still have, she's a coach of mine now. She was a Weight Watchers leader. I mean, she went to Weight Watchers before it was legal with her mother at 16. She's been doing it for 20 some odd years. And when she finally figured this all out, she had never been like in a right sized body. And now she's like, whatever, 5'8", 125 or something like that. And that was the first time since high school. Even in high school, she was never like that. And I said, what do you think, Bethany, made the difference? And she said, before I was above addiction, she had tried everything, And so that's like the main thing. And there is a little bit of a stigma to it. People think it's a drunk under a bridge or whatever, but it's just a bad habit that maybe it's slid into the possibility that physically, biochemically, you shouldn't be using this product.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think, I've asked myself that question, if sugar and flour are so addictive, then why is it that some people are able to stop themselves after just having half of a cookie or half of a brownie without going overboard? Because I believe that not everyone is equally susceptible to the addiction. And so what I believe that really makes a big difference on that susceptibility scale, measuring like how, are you going to go crazy and have so many? It's that part of it has to do with how your body responds to the sugar. And what made me wake up to this fact was that I looked at this blood glucose monitor, because if you had that sweet potato and you said your blood sugar jumped up that high, and somebody else had that sweet potato, theirs would not have jumped up that high. When your body responds to eating that sugar and it goes so high, then that is a big, big deal. And what I've done, I know this sounds crazy, but when I would go for lunches with some of my girlfriends, we'd have literally 10 girlfriends at lunch. And I had all the different needles before I had the blood glucose monitor. And I'd say, okay, everyone, nobody eat anything until you get to lunch. So nobody ate anything. I would literally go around the table before lunch and I took everyone's blood. Of course,
nice.
I took everybody's blood sugar. And then I waited an hour, and then I waited like 30 minutes. Then I also waited an hour and 20 minutes after they ate. And the skinniest girls at the table, no matter what they ate, their blood sugar was the lowest when they started, and they were the lowest when they ended. And one of the skinniest girls at the table, she literally had a Coke. She had a Coke. Okay. And her blood sugar, when she was done, and she had like a sandwich. I mean, it was like chips, a sandwich, She was done with her blood sugar. Now she didn't eat that much, of course. She probably had this much of the Coke. She had half of the sandwich. She had like 5 chips, But still, it was just junkety junk. And her blood sugar, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like 120 when she was
Right.
done.
That's amazing.
And so I think that has such a big impact of whether you decide that you can have some of that sugar is really part of it has to do with, obviously we have other issues. We've got our family of origin issues. We've got so many other pieces, but a big issue also has to do with what happens to you. What is your blood glucose doing when you eat that? Because if you go up and you're at 220, of course, when it comes down, you're going to want more and more and more and more.
Right. Yeah, definitely everyone's individual for sure. There's and it'll affect different people different way, just like you said about your friend. That's definitely true. And that's what people, they're not willing to be in the minority or majority, probably in this case, is that the majority of folks, these products do affect negatively. There are a few outliers like your friend or whatever who can pretty much eat anything and their blood sugar stays the same. What company are you having on? What CEO?
If you didn't just ask me that question, I could tell you. Name the ones you
Levels Health.
Levels Health, yes.
Yeah, they're good.
Yes,
yeah. Dr. Casey Means, she was on. Is that who you having on?
Yes.
Dr. Yeah, she's really good. You'll enjoy her. Your folks will enjoy her too, for sure.
Yes. So anything that I haven't asked you yet that you want listeners to know?
Wow, what a great question. I think what I was talking about, the emotional part and the cleaving apart, like a lot of people, when they come to me, they just want a food plan and an exercise plan. They come for the vanity and they stay for the sanity, right? Mm-hmm. They come because they think they need to lose weight, but this is all about the brain chemicals. This is all about the dopamine, the serotonin. I mean, they literally have SSRIs, serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors or whatever. These are chemicals that psychiatrists prescribe to try and make you feel better about yourself, right? Well, we're self-medicating with 20, 30, 40 teaspoons a day of this stuff. And basically the dose makes the poison. So what I want folks to know is I want them to know this new science, okay? This new science of brain rewards. And that when you're thinking about a sweet treat, you're not really thinking about a sweet treat. You're craving a dopamine hit. And the brain does not care. The brain will go to illicit sex, gambling. It will do anything to get its dopamine hit. It doesn't discriminate, okay? And when you've trained yourself since you were a child, probably your parents trained you, and in the womb, that when you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed or sad or hurt, I mean, when was the last time you saw a movie where a girl broke up with someone and didn't have an ice cream party, right? It's kind of a cultural norm. And so, like, until people realize that getting off sugar is only about 10% about the food and 90% about how they react psychoactively, how their emotions are modified and managed by sugar, that's how they succeed. That's how they're going to win this game, okay? So yeah, I mean, one of the things we find too is the folks who succeed are a little bit of pioneers, like the people that do intermittent fasting. It's kind of a new thing. It's not, the science is still developing, but they've done their research. They've actually tried it on their own body a little bit. Maybe they need a little help, right? So if those folks are in your audience, they think they're a little bit rebels. They're not afraid to say the hell with you, I'm going to try this kind of thing. Those are the people that succeed. And hopefully, as they succeed, they call them early adopters. As those people succeed, then more people will get the message. So,
and one thing I will say is that, I've interviewed over 1,000 women who are thin. And one thing I ask them, I say, let's say you gain 3 or 4 pounds, because anyone who, even if they're thin, they might raise 3 pounds, 4 pounds here. If you want to lose that 3 to 5 pounds that you've gained, every single one of them,
right,
without a doubt, they always said, well, if I feel like I'm, gained a little bit, the first thing I do is I cut back on any sugar that I'm eating. I cut back on the fruit. I cut back on the fructose. I cut back on any fruit or any sugar that I'm eating. If I want to lose weight, the first thing I do. And it's almost unanimous that all of them say that, whether they have a ton of sugar or not a sugar, they all say that as their number one answer.
I believe it for sure.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Tell listeners how they can find you, how they can follow you, and what programs you have going on right now.
Sure. We're at sugaraddiction.com, and we do the Quit Sugar Summit in January and September every year. And if you just go to Quit Sugar Summit, you can leave your email and we'll notify when that comes up each year. But at sugaraddiction.com, there's a little book. It's on Amazon too, but you can get it free and download it at the website called The Last Resort Sugar Detox. And we also have a 30-day challenge that is, we've had thousands of people go through. It's very successful. I get you get a video from me every day to guide you through the process, because the process, after doing thousands of them, we can see what's going to happen on day 3, 5, 7, 10, all the way through the process. And you kind of got a little bit of a preview, and you've got also a community of support. We've got 7,000 people in a group, in a forum. We've got, weekly, nightly meetings on Zoom. So you have this support structure that's there, and it just, in 30 days, you absolutely will know whether or not, sugar is an issue in your body and in your life. So check us out, sugaraddiction.com.
Awesome. I love it. Well, you guys stay tuned. We have another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.